Welcome back, Honors. All right, so we just wrapped up in class talking about the Persian invasions, right? So, big thing to clarify, I also had a couple of questions about this during class. I want to make sure that we understand that we are now leaving the Archaic period, right? So, the Archaic period ends with the Persian Wars, right? Don't let that terminology kind of stuff confuse you. Most oftentimes people refer to them as the Persian Wars, right? When actually you can argue that they're not really wars at all. So they're actually just one revolt, which is the Ionian Revolt, which wasn't a war whatsoever. And then the first Persian War, I consider the first Persian invasion, mainly just to not get you too confused, right? So, big things coming out of there, though, of course, are going to be the following little key points that we went over, right? We want to make sure coming out of the Persian Wars that the Ionians were a Greek colony and they revolted. 2, that Darius was the leader of Persia at the time and he crushed that rebellion. 3, Darius is going to be very upset when he finds out that the Athenians actually aided the Ionians in the rebellion, which causes the first Persian invasion, which was an only by sea/land assault. Then the Athenians are going to beat them at the Battle of Marathon. The Athenians are then going to build up their navy. And then the second Persian invasion happens when Xerxes tries to finish what his father started, and he tries to invade by both land and sea. Then the Spartans get involved. Battle of Thermopylae, major loss for the Athenians when their entire city gets destroyed, but at the Strait of Salamis at the Battle of Plataea, the Persians are finally destroyed, right? So, big thing, though, going forward was the creation of the Delian League, right? Athens kind of extending their control and their prominence among the city-states. Sparta becoming furious with Athens because they're trying to promote democracy and military alliances over the Spartan way of life, which is, of course, an oligarchical style democratic system of the two kings and the Council of Ephors. But big thing to really understand is now that the Persians aren't there anymore, and now that they're no longer a threat, we can now move into what is known as the classical period of Greece, right? So the classical period begins following the Persian Wars, right? So the Archaic period goes from Dark Ages, rise of Athens and Sparta, Persian Wars, and then the classical period arises out of that, right? And what a classical period is, or what this classical period is defined as, is a time when the Greeks are going to achieve new heights in art, architecture, theater, philosophy, all kinds of other economics, and multiple other forms of progress, right? But going forward, this is also going to then be headed off at the end by the Hellenistic period, which is another golden age later, but the Hellenistic period is a little bit different because that is the fallout of Alexander the Great and his father's conquests, right? So now the classical period, though, why does it have to come after the Persian Wars, right? Well, the results of the Persian Wars are going to leave room for the Greeks to grow, right? So when we're cleaning up after the Persian Wars, right, quote unquote, the results are that Greece is now free from Persian rule, right? So now that the Athenians have not once but twice rejected the Persian threat and actually pushed them out and pushed them away from any type of ideas of further invasions or possible dominations by the Persian Empire, the Greek city-states now have the ability to grow, right? They have now created a space for themselves to blossom and flourish. And also the Greek city-states are now beginning to form alliances, right? Like the Delian League coming out of Athens. Now the Athenians now also have a naval fleet of over 200 trireme vessels, and so you're going to see massive growth for Athens, right? So big thing going forward, though, a lot of kids do tend to ask, well, what about Sparta? How come Sparta, since they were so furious, right? I feel like Jenna Hasselback would have this awesome question because there was a light bulb moment today in class where she looked at me and I was like, so do you understand, Jenna, that there is a growing rivalry between Athens and Sparta because of this Delian League being established and the fact that Athens is taking the money in for themselves? And she was like, oh, okay, I understand what you're saying. This is going to lead to a further conflict. Well, you would think that conflict would come almost immediately after the Persian Wars, after Sparta had enough time to recoup its military force following the Battle of Thermopylae, right? And I think you would be 100% right normally. But what ends up happening is, you begin to be like, well, why didn't Like, I'm asking you because it never happened. But why didn't Sparta step up and put Athens in their place, right? Why didn't Sparta step up and be like, your Delian League is disgusting. Stop forcing democracy on other people. Stop trying to grow your empire and stop trying to use all that money for the betterment of yourself. Why didn't Sparta step up, punch them in the mouth, and call it a day? Sparta being as dominant as they are, right? Well, it had to do with the fact that Sparta got hit by not one, but two terrible catastrophes, right? So tensions were growing, yes. But when Sparta would have been preparing to actually attack Athens or like keep them from growing, about 15 years later after the end of the Second Persian invasion and the establishment of the Delian League, Sparta is going to be hit by an earthquake, right? Oh, good God. Like, they were ready to go and fight Athens, ready to go and prevent them from growing any further, ready to go and prevent any other Greek city-states of joining this league with them. But Sparta's going to get hit by an earthquake, and then on top of the earthquake, not only have they just gotten hit by a natural disaster, which absolutely terrifies me. Out of all of the natural disasters, I don't know what it is about an earthquake. It freaks me out so bad, but it does. Just the idea that the ground is shaking beneath you, right? And it saw a massive disorganization of the Spartan government, and a massive disorganization of their military, and the helots, their slaves, the people that they use to actually farm all their goods and do all their work and actually create products so the Spartan military could be completely dominated by Spartan youth, decides to have a rebellion, right? So they have a massive rebellion in 464 BC. And Sparta, because of these two issues, because they've lost so much property, and then because they are losing their workforce in the helots, they call out for help, right? Which is very out of character for them. They call for aid to suppress this rebellion. And the Athenians, from their Delian League, create an expeditionary force of 4,000 troops, right? And they're like, oh, we're going to go over there. We're going to save the day for Sparta. You needed us? No, what? And then they get to the shores of Sparta, and they offload, and then two Spartan warriors show up, and they're like, we're just kidding. We don't need you, all right? So, and they send them back, right? Now, this is a flagrant disrespect of Athenian preparedness and authority. They're saying, oh, just kidding. We know you came a long way, but we don't need you, right? We don't need your fancy democracy. We don't need your dumb Delian League. We don't need any of that. Pack it up, go home, right? Because what had actually happened is the Spartans just decided to execute 90% of the helots that they had that were under their control, and then they went off and they just took over other city-states and acquired new helots, right, to actually come back in and rebuild their city for them. And so this rivalry between the two of them keeps growing, right? But here's the thing. Yes, Sparta just sent these people back, but they're going to take years to try and rebuild their city, years to recruit another new helot force, and years to create the military that was recreate the military that was lost at the Battle of Thermopylae, right? So Sparta is kind of just really healing the wounds from these Persian wars and really getting square again, while Athens is now seeing a major growth. Because remember, yes, their physical city was destroyed by a rampaging Persian army, but their people, for the most part, stay alive, right? When the Persians arrived in Athens, no one was there, so they burnt the place to the ground, right? Well, the Athenians had ran away to some of their other established colonies. And meanwhile in Athens, now that Sparta is just picking the pieces up from this earthquake and picking the pieces up from this rebellion, a terrible ruler was the guy that sent the Athenian soldiers to Sparta. And his name was Simon, C-I-M-O-N, right? So now you don't need to write his name down. He's not on the test anywhere. But I'm just giving you a heads up that when he returned with that 4,000 group expeditionary force, he had returned to find out that he was about to be ostracized, right? Now remember, ostracism is the idea that was adopted by Solon, right? S-O-L-O-N, right? Solon, the guy that created the modern-day Athenian government, outlawed the Horos, outlawed debt slavery, created more democratic elections, and adopted this theory of ostracism. They used his theory, and they ostracized Simon, right? And in his absence, they turned to their new leader, their warrior leader, their general himself, and his name is Pericles. And he ushers in this age known as the Age of Persecles, right? Some of you are like, well, whoa, is the Age of Persecles a time period? No, the Age of Persecles is used to try and explain why Athens had this classical period, why they had this period of dramatic growth. A lot of it has to do with this particular leader, right? And Pericles decides to recreate Athens following the Persian Wars in the image of what he believed he could make it, which is a city veiled in marble. marble and gold, right? He believed that he could create a city that had fairer regulations for their government, fairer laws for their people, and then also had luxury to spare, right? So the Age of Pericles was created, and this dude was such a successful leader that he was elected to the Council of Archons 29 years in a row, right? And there was a Council of Archons. I believe there was 9 of them, right? So I think there's 9 of them. But he was elected to be an Archon and like basically run this group of leaders of Athens 29 times in a row. 29 times. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. 29 times in a row means that you must have been a phenomenally productive leader, right? And he was. We consider him to be the best ruler or leader of Athens in throughout all of classical Greece, throughout all of the Greek periods, period. Once the Athenians were established, anyway. How many archons in Athens? Yeah, 9. Sweet. Yeah, so it's a council of 9 people called archons, right? And he was their main leader. Now, why was he so great? Why was he elected archon 29 times in a row? A lot of it has to do with his accomplishments, right? Because, of course, we're going to hang our hat on the accomplishments of this man. Now, a plague didn't end up killing this guy, right? Pericles ended up dying during the plague of Athens, which some of you are like, oh, is that like the Black Plague? I would see where you would think that, and like that makes a complete logical connection, right? Some of you that are like, oh, I mean, I've heard of plagues before. But we believe that the Athenian plague might have just been an outbreak of the flu, right? So, but we're not positive. But in his time before he was killed by this flu-like illness, he is going to have major accomplishments. Some of the first ones being that he built walls around Athens and around their huge naval base that was going to be used to house these 200 new trireme ships, right? Now, these walls were really, really important because they were going to be protective, defensive walls that would be used to actually keep the wealthy and the Acropolis protected from any type of further attack from any Persian or invading military, right? These walls became a very, very important thing, and they're one of the reasons why Sparta never actually was able to breach the Athenian walls during a war. I'm not going to ruin it, but like they're during a war that will be coming up soon, right? But he is going to build walls all around Athens. And then he's also going to have the Acropolis completely rebuilt, right? He's going to have the Acropolis of Athens, which was completely destroyed by the second Persian invasion, completely rebuilt with a new version of the Parthenon and a new statue of Athena, right? So here's the ruins of the Parthenon, but he had the Parthenon completely remodeled. And in its glory, apparently, it looked like this. Let me pull it up. Parthenon, Nashville, Tennessee. Don't ask me why, but there is apparently a complete remodeled working of the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee, and you can go see it in Nashville, Tennessee. But yeah, so when he had it built, it apparently looked like this, right? You can see the Greek architecture with the columns. These are, of course, Doric columns. And then you see the pediments, which are actually the pediment, which is the top little triangular roof shape, which is very, very, very heavily on the Greek architectural scheme. And then also, he had a statue inside of this Parthenon of Athena built out of ivory and gold, right? Not just marble. Not granite, not quartz, not concrete, not anything that would have been economically feasible. But he had a 40-foot tall statue of Athena built out of ivory and gold. And if you don't know what ivory and gold are, ivory, of course, is elephant tusk, right? And then gold, of course, you know what gold is, right? So this is absolutely ridiculous. And some of you are like, where the heck is this thing now? Because this is, again, the remodeled, reproduced version that is in Nashville, Tennessee. And this is what we believed as a historical community that it actually looked like, right? Now, we also believe that the cost of this thing, the worth of it today, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 billion, right? So where the heck is this thing now? It was 40 feet tall also, which is absolutely ridiculous. We believe that the Romans probably destroyed it, right? Because typically when the Romans come in and take things over, they do like spoils of war, right? They take certain things for themselves. Like on the inside of the Arch of Titus, when they took over Jerusalem, you can see Roman soldiers carrying menorahs and large bags of gold and things like that back to the Empire of Rome. And they would usually take these massive spoils and they would go into the different forums and dump them out, right? To try and show the wealth of the Roman Empire that was growing. So we believe that the real statue of Athena might have been broken up, melted down, or created or made into other things, right? But unfortunately, the real statue has been lost to time. right? So, but it's still ivory and gold. That's absolutely insane. Now, he's also going to reform the government. Now, I know some of you are probably asking, is like, why is there a Japanese baby in a pile of yen? So I Googled yay money, and this is one of the first things that came up, and I thought it was hilarious, so I just threw it in there. All right, so now, but before Pericles, right, before Pericles was actually in power, government workers had to work for free, right? But wait a second. That means that the only people who could literally afford to be a government worker, to be elected to an archon, to be elected as a representative of the body of Athens or a tribal representative of Athens, that means they had to be wealthy. And why do they have to be wealthy? Because no one in ancient Athens can do a job without getting paid because they'll starve to death, right? No common farmer could work his way up through the classes and become a wealthy person because he's not getting paid, right? But Pericles is going to change that, right? Pericles is going to make it so government workers did get paid, right? After Pericles, they were paid reasonably, and that meant that some of the lower ends of the aristocracy and some of the lesser nobles could actually pitch their ideas, their theories, and try to grow Athens in a positive sense, right? Because this is really important. Because this means that, like, the wealthiest of the wealthy were government workers. Now, some of the lower end of this wealthy class could actually become like elected leaders of Athens to try and help out its poorer people, right? And nowadays, this is now a common thing, right? Because the big thing about it is, like, from this idea, we adopted this into our government because our government workers now get paid, right? Now senators make about $175,000 a year, which is ridiculous. They only work 3 days a week. It's insane. The vice president makes about $230,000, and the president makes about $500,000. And I don't think they get taxed, which is wild, which is so unfair. I want to make that kind of money. I guess I should just become president. Some of you are probably like, that's my nightmare. Well, that's fine. All right, now, anyway. But big thing is also going forward, Pericles is also going to create pay for government workers, equal elections as well to try and create less issues with voter practices and things like that. And then also, this is one of my favorite things about Pericles. He creates free theater seats for the poor, right? The theater, the Greek theater, is one of the most famous, well-known, and most important places of every single Greek city-state / polis, right? And when or as city-states began to grow, a lot of them began to adopt a design of theater known as the amphitheater. Ampha, of course, meaning around or surrounding theater, right? So the amphitheater right here is going to be one of the most important cultural places for every single Greek city-state. Inside of these amphitheaters, they would have massive plays where they would reenact myths or historical events or any other like particular play that had been written up until this point, right? And in these plays, they would wear these masks, right? Because some of the people were so far away, they wanted to be able to see the expressions and the emotions on the faces of the actors. So the actors would actually have them hidden behind their backs, and they would pull them out, and every time the emotion of the actor on stage would change, they would actually switch the mask in and out. They were made out of stone as well, so they're actually pretty heavy. But the fact that poor people now have access to these shows to participate in the Athenian pastimes, to participate in things that were typically only reserved for the wealthy, is a very important understanding to see why Pericles is so great. Because he tried to grow all things Athenian, right? And in this golden age of Pericles, and by the way, just so you know, a golden age is a time of great cultural prosperity. You're going to see massive growth of the Athenian Empire, right? Literally, Athens is going to begin to go up to other small, fledgling Greek city-states and be like, would you like to join our Delian League? How about you join our Delian League? And began to bring them inside of their growing expanse in their empire, right? If you actually look at this right here, Athens is one small city-state, but everything here in green, all these coastal ports as well as the islands that are inside of the Aegean, is going to be the growth of the Athenian Empire, and along all these areas, they began to establish cities, right? So this is important to understand that Athenians and the Athenian Empire under Pericles is going to have massive growth, not just culturally, locally, but also on an expansive term. So, but going forward also, there we go, you're also going to see new arts, theater, jobs, and a great economy is going to flourish under Pericles. And all the while, who is this infuriating? I'll give you two guesses, but you'll only need one. That is exactly right. Tiana, very, very good stuff. And I also heard Riley over there screaming it out. And then I also heard Aaron as well, right? Very good job. This is making Sparta furious, right? Sparta is growing angrier and angrier as the years go on. They believe that Athens is exerting too much power. They believe Athens is trying to take over all of Greece. They believe Athens is trying to use this democracy that they are being using, and they believe that they are trying to use the Delian League to impress greatness upon themselves. And they're not wrong, because let's take a step back, right? Let's take a step back real quick. Yes, Pericles is important. Yes, he's a great leader, but where did he get the money to rebuild that statue of Athena out of ivory and gold? Where did he get the money to rebuild the Parthenon? Where did he get the money to build those walls? Where did he get the money to create new theaters and give those seats away to the poor? From that Delian League, right? He was taking that money in and using it only to benefit the Athenians, right? He wasn't using it to benefit everybody inside the Delian League as much as he should have. He was using it for the grandeur of Athens, right? So Sparta is becoming more and more furious as the years go on, and things are going to bubble up here soon, right? But we also got to take a step back and talk about life in Periclean Athens, right? Because we've been talking about it like it's this grandiose, amazing thing. Like everybody was walking on sidewalks of gold and that everybody was just having the best time ever. It's actually not necessarily true, and it only really affected the wealthy in a super intense way, right? Because life in Periclean Athens wasn't perfect, right? It wasn't perfect, and there were some really disgusting parts about it, right? We'll get into some of those things a little bit tomorrow in class as well, but we're going to finish up a couple of them right now. So Athenians, just so you know, most common Athenians didn't have a ton of stuff, right? They didn't have a ton of stuff, and they lived with very few things, right? Most of the Athenians lived outside of the city, and they would keep a few animals for milk and meat and things like that. And most Athenians did not live in houses that were this nicely constructed, right? This would be the home of an Athenian upper class and or upper middle class resident, right? So now the Athenian home here, as seen here, is absolutely gorgeous, right? The Athenians would walk inside of this doorway, and the first thing that you would see in every Athenian home is an altar to the god or goddess that your family had chosen as their family patron god or goddess, right? Now, in the Athenian upper class homes, you would see rooms, like a living room and a storeroom or a shop and a dining room, right? I love the dining room thing because Greeks apparently ate everything laying down, kicked back and reclined like this, because everything they ate was with their hands, right? They ate breads and grapes and cheeses and some meats whenever they actually got a chance to. Lentils, figs, things like that. And they would actually just eat with their hands, lying back, which I think is absolutely awesome. And then also, as you can see up here at the top, you see the bedrooms as well. And one of those bedrooms is typically for the husband, while the other one is for the wife and children, right? So we'll talk about that stuff a little bit more when we get into gender and gender issues in ancient Athens and stuff like that tomorrow, right? And so the Athenian diet was also a very important thing for you to understand. They ate mostly things like wheat and barley and lentils and figs and grapes, along with a little bit of meat once every few days, but it wasn't this grandiose lifestyle. Every single person was going out and eating like this, because a lot of poor people didn't even eat this well. Most people that lived in Athens did not have a home that was this nice, right? There was still a very, very huge lower class within Athens, right? So, and the Athenian economy is going to rotate around this entire thing, right? Because most men worked with crafts and others worked with their hands. And the really weird thing about the Athenian growth, a lot of the Athenian economy and a lot of the growth of Athens and a lot of the growth of Athens during this classical period was a product of slavery as well, right? Now, just so you know, most of these slaves were coming from places that Athens had taken over, towards Thrace and towards other areas of the the Baltic Sea, right? And just so you know where the word slave comes from, the word slave comes from a derivative form in Greek meaning Slav, right? Meaning a Slavic person, which is usually going to be somebody from Eastern Europe, right? So slavery was heavily present in the Athenian economy. And so were issues with gender as well as sexism towards women as well. And we will talk about that stuff tomorrow. But I'll see you guys then. Y'all have a great one. Bye.